And I wonder maybe if you can just give people a sort of a background on where the new security push originated. I understand this with when the Provincial Offences Court moved into Tom Davies last summer?
Well, and actually this push for security frankly started before that. We have obligations under Bill 168 about a healthy workplace, a safe workplace, a harassment-free workplace. And we saw in employee surveys going back 2 years ago, as a matter of fact, concerns being expressed. And they weren't serious concerns. It wasn't like people were in fear at their jobs, but certainly the way that this building is laid out by today's standards was creating some apprehension amongst our staff about the way that people could move freely anywhere in the building, frankly. And so that was the initial impetus for putting this on the radar. It's been accelerated at certain stages. One of the stages was when the provincial court moved into the building. So again, we were required to bring the court in here because we lost our court space in the courthouse. Mm-hmm. And the province dictated many rules about how separation has to occur with courts and the various areas. And so that was certainly one of the focal areas, and it drove us to enhancing some of the features of our security. To add to that, we had a couple of instances within the building that were a little unsettling, some of them after hours, some of them during hours. I mean, nothing worthy of news, let's put it that way, but just if you're an employee working here, it kind of gives pause and has you think, oh, you know, that could happen again. And so we were also mindful of those kinds of situations.
I heard a story about someone sleeping on a couch on the 4th floor.
Things like that, yes, yeah. Different things that you know, truly an organization our size and with a building like this, we needed to be more aware of what the risks are and be actively shown to be doing everything we can to mitigate those risks.
Now, outside of council chambers, what kind of measures have come in to?
So the very first thing that came in was the fact that we all are required to wear ID cards now. This was something that used to be name tags that people wore, and then they went away and different things happened. But now it was understood that we needed to at least create an environment where staff could feel comfortable saying, excuse me, who are you, why are you here? And you know, and as long as you've got city ID, then that was great. And if you didn't, at least there was a reason to ask the question and a mechanism to try to identify who should rightfully be in the building, or particularly in a back hallway, that kind of thing. So we did a very slow, cautious rollout of the ID cards. All the traditional complaints came up. Oh, I don't like my picture. Oh, I don't want people to see my name. You know, why do they have to know my name? There were some issues of security in certain areas of the building. We deal with clientele that perhaps you wouldn't necessarily want your full name exposed. So we had to work through all those things, and so it was a slower process even than we wanted it to be. But as of about a year ago now, it's been a requirement for employees in this building to wear visual ID that they are indeed an employee of the City of Greater Sudbury.
Now, how do you balance those fears or concerns over security, or wanting to make sure you have a safe workplace, with the need for have an open government, an open building?
Absolutely, and it's something that we continue to struggle with. We've had many iterations of plans that have actually had to change over time. Some of it because the politicians have reflected that very same sentiment, that they're concerned about the impression that an action or a new plan, a new rule, the impression it leaves with the community. So we've been trying to be very cautious and very careful about how we roll these things out and how we bring them, and we're also trying to be open and willing to look at different ways to achieve the same thing. You're absolutely right. At the end of the day, this is a public building. There's no desire to make it a non-public building. In fact, many of the requirements of a functioning city hall require citizens to move around from department to apartment just in terms of getting something done. So we don't want to create a whole bunch of barriers or processes for things that are routine. At the same time, we really need to make sure that there isn't somebody walking into a meeting room that is an area that isn't really a public area, or wandering down a hallway and having people just kind of go, well, that's the norm, I guess I have no right to question who that stranger is walking down the back hallway of the building. So we're trying to define areas that are very public, and so that the public sees the same public open face that they've always experienced, and then where required, make those other areas, define them, but still not by putting up a barbed wire fence to define those areas, just
so this
more
is
of a
about
process.
security then, it's not about control, it's about making sure that staff feel safe.
Absolutely. It's about, as a reasonable employer, with the number of employees that we have, it's about reassuring and being able to demonstrate to our employees before there's something happens. Like, no, it's well and fine to say, look at all the things we did if something bad happens, but well before that, we want to show that we're aware of our responsibilities as an employer, and it is a different world. I mean, it is reasonable to take some precautions and to put some things in place that allow us to paint that picture for our employees.
Okay, now that's Tom Davies as a whole, and I'd like to talk about more about the council meetings, what people are going to notice that's different. One thing I know, you're going to redeploy the security guards and have more of a presence during meetings. Can you talk a bit about that?
Again, we've always had security in the building for council meetings or any big public event in the building after hours. We've made sure that there are security here. Again, especially given the nature of our building, it's prudent to have some people around to just kind of keep an eye on things and to be a resource if there's assistance that's required from a broader level. What we decided was that in the interests of again creating that awareness that we are trying to be a little more diligent about how we manage the security of the building and the well-being of our employees, that it would be quite easy to have the person who's sitting at information, otherwise not getting seeing much traffic once the meeting goes, to have him be present in the meeting. It's only designed to show that we're aware that we have those resources available to us. If there was something going on of a rambunctious nature, not that we have those things very often at all, but it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt rather, to have that kind of presence there, and just maybe re-emphasize the fact that we do take security seriously, and I think it'd be a prudent thing. I mean, we've got the person here in the building anyway, why not have them where the largest congregations are?
So there used to be 2 doors that you could access, now there's just 1, right?
Yep.
And the meetings used to be, the doors were pretty much open all the time, now it's just 15 minutes beforehand.
Yes, and the 15 minutes is not a hard, fast number. Just let me clarify that first off. I mean, what we're saying is that for sure, it's not like we're going to open the door as the meeting starts and let everybody scramble. But I mean, if it's easy to accomplish, we'll have the doors open whenever we can have the doors open. The point is that we don't think it's smart to have the public in there right before a council meeting with no other staff in the room. So. Again, it's a big room, it's got a large gallery, and there's a lot of open space behind the mayor's position all the way around the building. So all we're just trying to say is, rather than have it as an open space that we just all of a sudden assemble a meeting in, that some modicum of control is appropriate. And so we said, and that chamber council is locked all the time except when there's court. So that's one of the things that was not quite correct as printed. That Chambers has always been locked up, and now it's been open more often because of court. So we leave it open because court is a public venue as well. But when we're not holding court now, we generally we're supposed to be keeping those doors locked.
A member of the public who comes in who has a bag or whatever, can they expect to be searched, to have that bag searched?
Again, the term search, I think, is one that I think you want to be careful how you use it. I mean, and I've expressed this to my own team. When I think of a search, I think of what I go through at the airport. I think of, frankly, what I even go through at Disney. If you've been to Disney, they actually do physically search through your bag. I'm not even sure what they're looking for at Disney, to be honest. But anyway, that is not the intent of this. I think that we have to take a reasonable approach to enforcing the rules that council has dictated for decorum in that room. So one of the rules is there's no placards or props or things that could be a hazard.
It's funny you say that, just because councillors have told me that this is staff-driven. It's not coming from them. They're basically being told what you guys
absolutely. And the actions that we're doing, we have presented to council, and it has been a staff initiative, and we've kept them in the loop as to, for the same reasons that I've given you in terms of where this comes from and what our plan is. But at the end of the day, the rules of procedure for council do not allow placards or props, and that has nothing to do with security. That has been the rule that's been in place forever. So on one hand, we have a rule. We've always had the rule. There's no change in that. But one could argue we've done virtually nothing to enforce it, or to make sure that there's a reasonable effort to not have placards or props or things in there that could become a security hazard. We don't want something thrown. We don't want something used as a stick in the heat of a moment. And so that was why the rule was put in place.
I can remember many meetings where I've gone, lots of placards, T-shirts, yelling, never been an incident. I mean, years and years now.
Well,
And like, what has changed that all of a sudden now that has to be, there's laws and there's laws, and some laws are there in case you need them.
Yep.
Other laws are enforced all the time, and that was sort of one of the rules that was.
so, and you'll see the discretion that we've applied in that regard with the issue of placards. I mean, I think it says no props. So one could argue that that 10 people with the same shirt is a prop. That's not the intent of what the wording is, right? We're trying to be reasonable. What we don't want is have placards in there and banners and blocking the view, or a stick in there with a sign on the end of it that if things got heated could be used alternatively. Let's call that.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been the rule for a while, and we've on many occasions asked people to leave their placards outside when they've been obviously, when they've come in holding the placard. We've politely asked them to leave them outside, and you're right, we haven't had any issues with that. They've either left them outside and then come into the meeting, and it's been absolutely fine. Again, when we're looking at all of the rules that we have and the security we're trying to put in place, I think there's a reasonable point that we should go through to make sure that we're at least saying, let's demonstrate that we are serious about the no placards rule, the no props rule. We don't want baseball bats being brought in or something like that. And so that's the context in which search is used. If you come in with a great big green garbage bag, then I guess you could say we're going to search it if we're going to look in that green bag and see if there's a placard.
Yeah.
The intent is not to go through purses and backpacks inch by inch, and that's not the kind of threat that we're worried about.
I've talked to other municipalities, and what they tend to do is, if there's a meeting that they know is going to be hot, like the the SCAT meetings, or store hours referendum, or a big development in Minnow Lake, they'll bring in extra security. They'll sort of focus a bit more on that meeting, rather than having a blanket sort of clamp down that Sudbury's doing. Why not take that approach? Why not go case by case, especially since there's never been any problems?
Well, so we like to think that we're taking the opposite approach, and for a good reason. That if we always have a reasonable level and a minimal level of risk management, then you don't heighten things by all of a sudden having police guards and saying, at the door, saying, oh, they expect trouble tonight. Look at that. They got security here. They've got 2 or 3 security or a policeman. And that doesn't do you any better either, to start the meeting off with armed people in the building because you're anticipating trouble. So, not to say that if there's a serious threat that we wouldn't do whatever we had to if we did have to enhance security, but I think what we'd prefer to do is just slowly set a new tone for the way that we're going to manage all of our meetings, so that there are less exceptional
You
ones.
want to set though for people, to saying, okay, if you're coming here, you can't get in, you're going to be locked until 15 minutes. When you come in, if you have something that looks suspicious, we're going to look through it. You can't demonstrate, you can't.
Well, but you're combining different things there, though. I mean, like I say, the placard issue has nothing to do with security. That rule was made as a council procedure. I believe it's in the council procedure bylaw.
Since I've covered council,
the placards have absolutely not been ignored. I can tell you categorically, we have asked people to leave placards at the door on numerous occasions. If they sneak one in, and if it ends up popping up, no. Do we send a team over and wrestle them? No, we don't. But absolutely, we have been sensitive to the placard issue, and it's something that it's one of the early rules that council agreed to or adopted. I don't even know where it came from, but it was one of the general things about decorum in the council chambers that it was a general consensus that is a place for proper meetings, not for protests, not for loud things that are disruptive. That is where the business of City Hall gets done. And so we're trying to find a place to make sure that we can put some things in place to the best of our ability, ensure that kind of decorum and ensure that kind of good decision making can go on without interruptions that are really disruptive to the decision making process. There are lots of places to protest. We have protests in the foyer lots of times. We have protests outside. It's not about stopping protest. It's about looking at that 2 or 3 hour period in the evening, and is that the best place to have a 1 hour protest with placards and disruption when that's the business of council? And I think when you look at it in that context, I think you'll find most councils would be of the same sort of understanding in terms of what they're trying to do at their council meetings, in terms of having it be the forum for protest.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the new sort of rules for the media. I've talked to a lot of cities, and Sudbury's these rules are by far the most restrictive. And I'd like to start with when we were moved from the media table last year. Now, first we were told that it was required because the prisoner's box is going there, and there's no room. Then when someone objected and they put rollers on because obviously the optics of having a prisoner's box during city council isn't very good. So then they were put rollers on it and they moved it out, and then we were told, oh, how about there? And they said, oh no, it's a fire rule. You can't can't do that. So, when the story keeps changing, it makes you a little, makes you wonder. And we were also told that staff needs to sit there. Well, the only time I've ever seen a problem with staff seating is during budget time, when the whole departments come and there's, a lot of staff there. Otherwise, there's often empty seats. And it really felt to me and a lot of other members of the media that we were sort of being pushed out for control.
As you recall, there was a staff table on that side and the media table, and we were absolutely required to move the staff table that was there out to make room for a prisoner's box. And so it was decided that the other reason was that the press were also not allowed to be in the court area. So if you recall, there was a time when we had little swing doors at the bottom of the stairs even. That stuff was all prescribed by the by the province in requirements that they required for their court security. And I believe that another factor was that press weren't supposed to be in the actual court. They had to be in what was defined as a public area for the court. The best way to handle the whole thing was since we had to move them out of that area for a court, create a press area there, create a staff area on the other side. I'm not going to say it was thought out infinitely and that maybe we couldn't have done a better job. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to give you a sense that it wasn't about, oh, here's our opportunity, let's get the media out of there. And it's unfortunate if that's what it felt like, but I'm trying to give you some actual logical history behind it, as weak as it may be in your eyes. But it really was a progression of these things, and we were wrestling with all kinds of things with this court coming into this building. We had issues on the stairways and the hallways. We had all kinds of timing issues, and we were sort of dealing with every one of them as they came up with an impossible deadline that in the end got extended. But we were supposed to be in there in January. I don't think we started till April. So a lot of these things were being done quite quickly as well, which is no excuse, but we were dealing with things incrementally, and again, the root of it was we're losing a table either way on that council floor, and we do need room for staff at budget time. You see, as you said, there's a whole throng of them there that support the budget process. And the other sort of, absolute was that the press couldn't be there for court, so they had to be somewhere else. So, all right, let's move them for everything, and then we still preserve a staff table.
Now, the ID cards. That's not that unusual. I've talked to a few other cities that they require ID cards, but this will be the only community where the ID cards don't get you full access to the floor, where those restrictions are still in place. To get the card, I have to give you my Facebook and my Twitter. Why? And I'm required. It's not a request. I have to give it to you if I want a card. Why is that?
What we'd want to do, I think we probably blurred the line, and we probably need to rethink how we phrase that request. I'll put it that way. I just learned of that recently. That's one of the requirements. And I think it's great if we can have that information, because we're always checking all of the media outlets to make sure for accuracy and for things that we should be trying to get corrected if there are actual mistakes, and also because it's a good source of information. So I think it would be helpful if we're developing a partnership with the media to have that information so we can follow what it is you're writing about, what it is you're covering, and what we're supposed to be enabling you to do.
So it's monitoring.
So I think it should be stated not as an absolute requirement, but probably as a helpful thing for us to build the relationship. It sounds to me like that's not the way it's been presented, and we will fix that.
Also, we're told that nobody is guaranteed to get approval, that you guys have the right to refuse anybody you want.
I think that's standard language. I think that
let's withdrawn without
sure.
notice.
So I'll tell you what. Let's wait until we refuse someone, or until we withdraw it, and I will do a full-on interview at the time with you and give you a full.
But why is that language there?
Because it's standard language. So to say that I'm going to hand out accreditation and I'm not going to reserve the right to take back my accreditation, kind of defeats the purpose of having the accreditation in the first place. So
I might agree with you if the language was, for just cause, we can withdraw.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
We can refuse it,
sure.
For whatever, if there's specific reasons.
And that's precisely why I go back to my earlier comment, which is, let's deal with this one if there is something. I can't see, I think it's going to be a pretty concrete example of why we would take that kind of a drastic action, and I can't even think of the scenario. So I think it needs to be there as an outlet, but I can't think of an opportunity. It's kind of like the disclaimers you see in other agreements where you think, oh, well, that's never going to happen. Sure, I'll agree to that because it's never going to happen. But I mean, unless you think that that we've made some kind of standard that's difficult for you to keep your accreditation, then I would absolutely want to delve into that. But I don't think we've done anything that leads you to believe that there's a risk of you showing up at a council meeting and all of a sudden saying, "Oh, sorry, your accreditation's been pulled."
In practice, I mean, everyone knows my Twitter, my Facebook. It's more in principle. And the same with approving. It seems like you guys are really all of a sudden controlling who can control, who can cover media, who can cover councils, which media. You're defining who media is, who is eligible to receive these passes, and you're asking for some fairly intrusive information.
So I'd be willing to look. I'd be willing to look at the information, and if you find it intrusive, I'm absolutely willing to look at that, because that's not the intent to be intrusive. Like I said, I think that the way we phrased that may have been inappropriate, and I'm willing to relook at that in terms of the request for, or the need for, or the requirement for certain things, as opposed to, you're right, it's common knowledge. I mean, one of the points I've also made is that this isn't the House of Commons, there isn't the global media here, and we're trying to sort out 50 media people and keep them all straight. So I think there is a place for us to be reasonable as well, and I absolutely invite any opportunity to balance that off. If we're doing new things, we're trying to puff up a little bit like a big city, and if we've got some of it not quite right and a little over the top, I'm completely willing to go back and look at those things and to address them, because I agree that this is about a good, solid partnership. It's about safety and security for everyone, not for the media, not for staff, not for public, but for all of them, for council. So if we're doing things that are contrary to that and are creating ill will and disadvantaging a partnership, then I want to jump on those. That's not the intent here at all.